Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call today's meeting of the Assembly Committee on Natural Resources to order. Madam Secretary, would you please call the roll?
Assemblywoman Anderson.
Present.
Assemblywoman Black. Assemblywoman Brown May.
Here.
Assemblywoman Carlton. Assemblywoman Cohen.
Here.
Assemblyman Ellison. Assemblywoman Gonzalez.
Here.
Assemblywoman Hanson.
Here.
Assemblywoman Martinez. Assemblywoman Titus. Assemblyman Wheeler. Chair Watts.
And I am here. Thank you. With that, we do have a quorum. Madam Secretary, I know it's a busy time of session. We have some committees that are still going right now, so we'll try and make sure we get everyone marked present as they arrive, and see if we can get everyone together. Thank you all for joining us today, both in person and remotely, for our committee meeting. We have 4 bill hearings on the agenda today. In addition, I am planning to adjourn the meeting at 5:30. So we'll see how far we can get. And right now, my plan is to proceed in the order listed on the agenda. So we will hear Senate Bill 34, followed by Senate Bill 438, followed by SB 443, and finally SCR 9. So with that, we'll get right into our agenda today. Won't go over all of the housekeeping notes. I think most people are familiar with how things operate here. So we'll begin by opening the hearing on SB 34, which makes various changes relating to agriculture. And I welcome whoever we have with NDA to help kick off the presentation for this bill. You can proceed whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Doug Ferris. I'm the Animal Industry Division Administrator for the Department of Agriculture, and it is my pleasure to appear before you today to present to you Senate Bill 34. Senate Bill 34 updates the titles and Nevada police officer standards and training qualification of the department's law enforcement staff. It provides inclusion of NDA law enforcement staff with first responder occupational and health disease coverage, as well as the addition of adding the word visual when pertaining to brand inspections. To provide background, the Nevada Department of Agriculture currently has 5 sworn law enforcement staff positions utilized in educating the public and industry, as well as upholding and enforcing agricultural laws across the state. NDA law enforcement officers operate fully marked and equipped law enforcement vehicles while performing traffic stops of vehicles transporting agricultural products and investigating theft or loss of livestock, illegal killing of livestock, trespass, illegal importation of animals and agricultural product, and unlicensed agricultural businesses and or products. Protection of public health and safety is at the forefront of NDA law enforcement officers' missions as first responders and certified peace officers of the state of Nevada. The NDA officers assist local, state, and federal agencies during vehicle crashes or with animal abuse neglect investigations, and face the same risks of being exposed to harmful chemicals or inhalants, either being transported in vehicles or produced due to a vehicle crash and conditions, or at the locations that contain chemicals utilized in manufacturing of illicit drugs, which is the basis for the insurance protections in this bill. The proposed position title revision is to provide clarity and update the titles to reflect the title that is more consistent with the job duties and nationally recognizable title of law enforcement personnel. NDA law enforcement staff are also currently required to hold a minimum of a Category 2 Nevada Post Certificate. SB 34 would update these requirements to a Category 1 Nevada Post Certificate, and thus will create equity amongst NDA law enforcement staff with other state, county, and city law enforcement officers such as game wardens, state troopers, deputy sheriffs, and city police officers. To note, all current NDA law enforcement staff already hold a Category 1 Nevada Post Certificate, so this would not negatively affect any of our staff, but would provide future benefits to the department by providing a larger group of interested candidates when filling vacant positions. SB 34 would also ensure that NDA law enforcement officers are included under the same occupational health and disease coverages that are provided to police officers across the state. This bill does not create any new positions to the department. And with that, I thank you, Chair, and that concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much for the clear and concise presentation, Mr. Ferris. I appreciate it. Members, are there any questions for the presenter on this bill? We'll start with Assemblywoman Gonzalez, and then we'll go to Assemblyman Ellison.
Thank you so much, Chair. Assemblywoman Gonzalez, District 16 for the record. So you said that there was currently 5 officers, correct, under your jurisdiction?
For the record, Doug Ferris, there are 5 officers, sworn positions, law enforcement officers, 6 including my position, actually.
So would this give you guys the ability to hire more officers? Or would it
For the
stay at
record,
the
Doug-
6?
Yes, you're correct, Assemblywoman. For the record, Doug Ferris, it would stay at these 6 positions. It's just changing their classification from a Category 2 post to a Category 1.
And what is the need? I'm sorry, I don't know if I missed that, but what is the need to change their categorical positions?
For the record, Doug Ferris, the intent behind SB 34 was because of the difficult in filling positions for our agency. We had a position located in Elko that took over 2 years to fill. Part of that issue is that our officers are not afforded the same benefits and the same classification as other law enforcement officers. And so with doing this, we believe that the job pool would increase and we'd be able to gain more staffing when we have vacant positions.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. And in addition, I'd just add that staffing levels are usually set through the budgetary process. So this is setting the structure for those positions. And I was also going to ask about the impact that this may have on recruitment. So I appreciate your remarks in that regard, Mr. Ferris. With that, we'll move on to Assemblyman Ellison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have one. Usually, it used to be that when the Department of Ag needed it, they would call a sheriff department in. And the sheriff department actually was the enforcement agency, were they not?
For the record, Doug Ferris, to my knowledge, the department has always had sworn peace officers. Still to this day, though, we will ask for assistance, whether it be from a county, city, or state agency if needed. But I believe at one time there were actually 12 positions, and they were all sworn law enforcement officer positions at that time.
Follow-up, sir?
Go ahead.
And how long has that been, do you know?
For the record, Doug Ferris, I'm sorry, how long has what been?
How long has
Assemblyman?
they had sworn police officers?
For the record, Doug Ferris, I actually don't have that information in front of me. I know it goes into at least I would say late 80s, 90s from what I have seen of historical documents. It's been quite a few years.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'd just also point out, Mr. Ellison, that you can see some of the modifications that are made in Section 11 refer to NRS Chapter 289. And so it's changing it to reference an agricultural police officer, but the previous language around these persons designated as field agents or inspectors were designated as peace officers under that section of statute.
And Mr. Chair, do you know how long that's been?
I do not. If Mr. Amburn has an opportunity to look at it, we can circle back on that, or if you have the information on when that was added to NRS.
Thank you, Chair Watts. Alan Amburn for the record. So looking at NRS 561.225, in which the director may designate such department personnel as field agents and inspectors in the enforcement of these provisions, so these are the enforcement personnel, that has been around since the 60s.
And Mr. Amburn, if you have an opportunity, can you let us know when the language in NRS 289-290 seems to have been initially put into law? And we can come back to that if you'd like.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Watts. Alan Amburn for the record. So I believe that was 1993.
Great. Thank you very much for that quick response. Assemblyman Wheeler, go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Ferris, a Category 2 peace officer usually can't carry a weapon without a dispensation, but a Category 1 officer can. Are you planning on arming these officers?
For the record, Doug Ferris. Actually, Category 2 peace officers do carry firearms. They are police officers. That's what our officers currently are, is Category 2. They have the powers to make traffic stops, carry firearms, and other personal defense weapons. So Category 3, I believe, assemblymen do not carry firearms.
Sorry, I must have been mistaken. I thought Category 2 had to have a dispensation to do that.
Thank you. Yes, we're getting some orientation in police officer standards. So with that, members, additional questions? Assemblywoman Brown-May, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Ferris, for that presentation. My question is relative to the training. And I'm just curious to know, is the training going to change as you change the category from 2 to 1? And I see noted here on page 7, Category 1 peace officer by the Post-Training Standards Commission. Is that different with the change in this category?
For the record, Doug Ferris, that would not change. The training is the same. And as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, all of our officers are currently Category 1 peace officers. They all attended the Nevada Post Academy and are Category 1 peace officers, so they meet the required training of Category 1 peace officers annually.
Thank you. Members, any other questions for our presenter on this bill? Quick additional follow-up. Go ahead.
Sorry, Assemblywoman Gonzalez, District 16 for the record. So with changing their category, would anything in their job change with this new category?
For the record, Doug Ferris, no, their job positions, their job descriptions would stay the same. They would just be operating under that Category 1 certificate rather than a 2 for requirements.
All right, thank you. Members, last chance at questions. All right, seeing no more, thank you again for the presentation. With that, we will open up testimony on Senate Bill 34. We'll begin with testimony in support. We'll start with the room. Seeing none. Broadcast Production Services, can we see if we have anybody wishing to offer testimony by phone?
To testify in support on SB 34, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Once again, to testify in support on SB 34, please press *9 now. Chair, there are no callers in support at this time.
Thank you. With that, we'll move to testimony in opposition of SB 34. First in the room. Seeing none, Broadcast Production Services, can we see if we have anybody by phone?
To testify in opposition on SB 34, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in opposition at this time.
Thank you. And with that, we'll move to anyone wishing to provide testimony in neutral on SB 34. First here in the room. Seeing none, BPS, can we see if you have anybody by phone or by Zoom? If anyone wants to provide testimony by Zoom, please turn on your video. Seeing none, BPS, let's go to the phones.
To testify in neutral on SB 34, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in neutral at this time.
Thank you. Mr. Ferris, are there any closing remarks you'd like to make?
I would just like to thank for the record, Doug Ferris, I'd like to thank the committee for your time and appreciate this opportunity to present in front of you today.
Thank you very much, and don't go anywhere quite yet. I'm going to call a very quick recess, and then we'll be back. All right, with that, in case I didn't say it already, I will close the hearing on SB 34. I have been granted authority by the Speaker to waive the 24-hour requirement before work sessioning a bill. So with that, I will open the work session on SB 34, which we just heard. Members, any questions? Go ahead, Mr. Elson.
I know we do have sworn deputies with the Department of Ag in Elko, which had been they've done a good job for several years, but there's been some issues brought up with some of the other agencies, and so I'm going to call my sheriff. I'm going to vote yes, but I'm still going to call my sheriff and ask him the problem that they did have, and I don't think it's with the Department of Ag. I think it was with another agency. So thank you.
Understood, thank you. And just to be clear, this bill only affects the officers within the Department of Ag. Any other questions or comments?
I just have some reservations, so I'll be voting no out of committee, but I can change it, or I reserve the right to change it on the floor. I'm not sure where I'm at on the bill.
Does anyone else have any reservations about the bill? Thank you for that, Assemblywoman Hanson. With that, I would accept a motion to do pass SB 34. I've got a motion from Assemblywoman Brown May, a second from Assemblyman Wheeler. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? We have one nay from Assemblywoman Gonzalez. However, the motion does carry. And I will assign the floor statement on that to Assemblywoman Brown May. Thank you. With that, we'll go to the next item on our agenda, which I believe is SB 438, which revises provisions related to agriculture. With that, I'll invite, I believe we have Ms. Jepson joining us. Please, you may proceed whenever you're ready, Ms. Jepson.
Thank you. For the record, Ashley Jepson with the Nevada Department of Agriculture. I'm the Plant Industry Administrator for the department. Thank you, Chairman and members of the committee, for the opportunity to present Senate Bill 438. This really is specific to Title 21 Code of Federal Regulations, Part 112, and that pertains to the Food Safety Modernization Act Produce Safety Rule. This entire rule is geared at those that are producing products that are commonly consumed raw to have preventative food safety measures as opposed to reactionary. So it's establishing specific requirements pertaining to the growing, harvesting, packing, and holding of produce for farms of a certain size and scope. What we're proposing in this bill is for the department to be able to actually implement these federal requirements and to do so on a state level, as opposed to just under FDA. We believe that we can provide the resources and the assistance needed to help producers meet compliance while also filling that inspection service as is detailed in the bill. The Title 21 and Part 112 really talks quite a bit about the expectations of these farms that have to comply, and it's typically geared at farms that are a size or a scope where they're distributing fairly broad. So not just on a local level, their product is potentially distributed fairly widely in the food system. So it's making sure that they're doing preventative steps. We've learned a lot from food safety outbreaks, and those lessons have been encompassed in these federal requirements. So that, just to give context, includes water testing, monitoring for animal intrusion, really looking at the biggest risks for foodborne illness contamination on your farm and trying to have mitigation measures in place. With that in the bill, we also have language that would allow us to react quickly if we did identify that there is an immediate food safety risk present. So that's there in addition to ongoing compliances that could lead to an egregious situation that could pose a public health threat. With that, I know there's a lot of moving pieces to that portion of federal law, so I'm happy to answer any questions, but try to give a little bit of context as to what we're trying to do here for public safety. Just one thing that I'll provide for clarification, these farms would have to either be inspected by FDA. We work under a cooperative agreement with FDA to do that on a state level, and this is a requirement of that cooperative agreement for this to be in statute for us to continue with that service. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, and that will conclude my presentation.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Ms. Jepson. We appreciate it. Members, I'll open it up for questions on SB 438. All right, I have one while others are thinking about it. So, and you may have covered this, but if you can just circle back on this. So we're adopting some of these measures by reference, and I can see that we're adding a new chapter. So I guess my question is either in statute or another portion of regulations, is the department already undertaking some of these activities, and the adoption of some of these federal regulations by reference is just expanding it, or is this creating or expanding your roles and responsibilities compared to what they currently are today? Although I know you did state that this is in alignment with some of the partnerships that we have with other agencies.
For the record, Ashley Jepson, thank you for the question. That's actually a great question. So there's two answers to that. One being, yes, we have been performing the compliance inspections, and we've been doing that under FDA commissioning. So FDA actually did release funds to states because they knew this was a pretty big a beast for a state to undertake and for farms to have to comply. So there was funding to establish that cooperative agreement for a state to provide education and regulatory services. At that time, they allowed us to do it under that FDA commissioning. However, it's reached the point, they gave us the first 5 years to start working towards getting this adopted. And now the expectation is if they are to continue to provide the funding for the state to have that oversight, it has to be adopted in statute, which is a big part of what's leading us here. In terms to the other part of your question regarding our previous existing authority, the only thing we've had in 583 allowed us to respond if there was an adulterated produce product or something that was of threat, so to speak, to the public. But it was fairly vague. It didn't really give us, it's not referencing these regulations, which are very specific on those expectations of the large farms. So that also is driving this as well.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that additional context. Members, are there any other questions? Vice Chair Cohen.
Thank you, Chair. So if the cease and desist letter is ignored and the order to recall the produce is ignored, what's the next step? And, I understand why a cease and desist is necessary, but what if there's still product that's getting out there during that time that's dangerous?
For the record, Ashley Jepson with the Nevada Department of Agriculture. Thank you for the question. That's another really great point. So we will still be working very closely with FDA in the event if there's ever an immediate risk or something, particularly that poses a threat to county, state, and then nationwide, they would be involved as well. So if they were to not be following that cease and desist, we would be working with FDA and our local health authorities to try to address immediately the public health threat.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I do believe there are also civil penalties within this chapter that may apply as well. Assemblyman Ellison, go ahead.
Thank you. You just hit on one of them that I was getting ready to ask, the civil penalties. And here's the other thing I was going to ask. If they come in and find there might be a problem, they probably put them on notice, correct? But what happens, they probably give them a cease and desist, but at that point in time, they find out there's not. How long does that take? And if it does take a little bit, what happens to the product? I mean, could you answer that, or is that clarified enough?
For the record, Ashley Jepson, I will do my best. So I think every instance is a by case situation. So I want to preface it with really our goal is to help farms to comply with these regulations and to be successful and find out where these risks are happening. As I mentioned, there tends to be kind of the three big contributors. It's usually health and hygiene of staff or those visiting the farm. It's water. It's usually animals are the three big culprits. So if we observe things that could pose threats as inspectors, our first goal is to notify them and help them to get that in alignment for public safety. We all learn, and our goal is to help people be successful. But to your question, if we see something that, hey, that employee is clearly very, very ill and they're handling product that's about to enter stream of commerce, we need to take immediate action. That's an instance where we need to work with them to identify the severity of the issue and make sure that we're exercising the authority here to prevent that product from entering the stream of commerce. And same thing, we'd be working at that stage with FDA, with the farm to get into compliance, but it would really depend on the situation of whether it's truly egregious, whether we can contain it and keep it from getting out, at what stage it's at in terms of risk. We want to react based on the level of risk to the public.
Follow up, sir. Yeah, and I totally agree. And I was following one from back east that one brought into COVID. Next thing you know, that 30, 40, 50 people that were sick. And so they shut them down. But the thing that was, there was another farm that was put on notice and shut down. But they come to find out that wasn't true. So how long, if you notice, say, oh, wait, it was, but yet we pulled whatever the problem was away and you can open back up. Is that right away? I mean, is that something they get right in there and do? Or my problem is if they sit for quite a while, then you have problems.
Sure. For the record, Ashley Jepson, from what I've been familiar with, it's been, every case is so very different. So typically when they've actually tied it to, it could be say it's a common processor that's packing for 10 different farms. They try to isolate with the information that they have from the consumers that have become ill. And, they try to address those as quickly as they come to figure out where it's actually sourcing. But in terms of, if they did find that something was erroneously linked to a farm that had no ties, it would be fairly quick that CDC typically releases the notice that these are actually the operations you need to avoid versus these ones. And the moment they have the information that there's been an error, they release it. But unfortunately, these investigations do take quite a bit of time based on the complaints and trying to link it. So there's not really a set time. It's very scenario specific.
Thank you. Members, any additional questions for the department on SB 438? Seeing none, thank you again, Ms. Jepson, for the presentation. With that, we'll open up testimony on SB 438. We'll start with testimony in support, first here in the room. Seeing none, BPS, can we see if we have anyone wishing to provide testimony by phone?
To testify in support on SB 438, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in support at this time.
Thank you. With that, we'll move to testimony in opposition of SB 438, first here in the room. Seeing none, BPS, can we see if we have anyone wishing to testify in opposition by phone?
To testify in opposition on SB 438, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in opposition at this time.
Thank you. And finally, we'll move to testimony in neutral on SB 438, first here in the room. Seeing none, in Zoom, if anyone has neutral testimony, please turn on your video. Seeing none there, BPS, can we see if we have anyone by phone?
To testify in neutral on SB 438, please press star 9 now. Chair, there are no callers in neutral at this time.
Thank you. Ms. Jepson, are there any closing remarks that you'd like to make?
For the record, Ashley Jepson, no, just thank you for your time. I know it can be difficult when it's referencing a CFR and trying to put those pieces together. So I appreciate your thoughtful questions and thank you.
Thank you very much. With that, I will, Assemblyman Ellison, go ahead.
I'm sorry to be a pain in the buttocks, but why is not Mr. Busselman being, he has no comments at all. He's with the Department of Ag. Is there a reason why he hasn't testified or asked any questions or brought any information forward?
I don't know if the department can necessarily answer that question, Mr. Ellison.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, sir.
Thank you. Although not providing any comment, and I know this is only tangentially related, but we did make sure to get notice of this meeting out well in advance so that people could provide testimony in person, remotely, or in writing. And I have not seen anything indicating any issues with the measure. All right. With that, I will close the hearing on SB 438, and again, we're going to take a brief recess. All right, the committee will come back to order. With that, I will now open up, again, pursuant to Assembly Standing Rule 57, I have the authority to open up the work session without waiting 24 hours. So I will open up the work session on SB 438, which we just heard. Members, are there any final questions? All right, seeing none, I would accept a motion to do pass SB 438. I've got a motion from Assemblywoman Anderson, a second from Assemblywoman Martinez. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously of the members present. I will assign that floor statement to Assemblywoman Anderson. Thank you. With that, I know I had said we were going to go in order on the agenda, but at this point, I am going to take SCR 9 out of order. So that is going to be the next bill that we're going to be hearing is Senate Concurrent Resolution number 9. Welcome, Ms. Assemblywoman Peters, to the table. I know that I believe there's other folks that are going to be involved. Yes, Mr. Lawrence. And we are going to try and keep this quick as we have another measure to hear after this. But with that, thank you. Welcome. You can proceed whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Chair, and I think we can keep this relatively quick. Good afternoon, committee members and Chair, Vice Chairs. Well, for the record, I am Sarah Peters, representing Assembly District 24 in the heart of Reno. Thank you for the opportunity today to present Senate Concurrent Resolution 9 for your consideration. This measure is a result of the work accomplished by the Legislative Committee for the Review and Oversight of the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency and Marlette Lake Water System. It's a mouthful, but a great committee if you have the opportunity to serve on it in the interim. Those familiar with the committee understand the dynamic relationship between the natural and human environments and the importance of the scientific research and application of those sciences around the Lake Tahoe Basin. In addition to its glorious and historically pristine reputation, Lake Tahoe is also the headwaters of the Truckee Meadows and feeds a dynamic system used for domestic, recreation, wildlife, and agricultural uses. Lake Tahoe is also unique in the context of jurisdictional oversight, compacts, and interlocal agreements that range in issues from transportation and infrastructure and wildfire management to research, study, and planning for the natural environment, to name a few. The goal of this measure is to express the support of the legislature for this Nevada system of higher education to work collaboratively and enhance collaboration in its science and research efforts addressing the needs of the Lake Tahoe Basin and with the Tahoe Science Advisory Council and other state agencies and decision makers in the basin. This collaborative relationship would reduce redundancies, increase efforts, and implementation of science-driven recommendations. Research institutions, including University of Nevada, Reno, and the Desert Research Institute, are already leading the way in basin-related research, and this enhanced collaboration will assist in attainment of research goals outlined by the basin partners and advisory groups. We have an obligation to effective, evidence-driven policy adoption in the Lake Tahoe Basin. And in the following testimony, and I'm going to cut it down. I apologize, folks. If you can just keep it to 2 minutes of support testimony. In the Senate hearing, I asked that our research partners also testify on the bill language, but because of our bereaved timeline this week, I'm going to request that they keep it to 2 minutes of support testimony if they would. You will see how our institutions do play an enormous role in helping us attain this goal. I'm going to ask that Mr. Lawrence with DCNR please provide a few brief statements on DCNR's interest in this particular piece of legislation.
Thank you very much. Mr. Lawrence, you may proceed whenever you're ready.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Watts and members of the committee. For the record, I am Jim Lawrence, Deputy Director for the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. I really do appreciate the opportunity to testify in support of SCR 9. And I also want to thank the interim committee and Assemblywoman Peters for all of the work and time and dedication to Lake Tahoe issues over the interim and for supporting this resolution. A brief background is in 2015, the Nevada Department of Conservation and Natural Resources entered into a memorandum of understanding with the California Natural Resources Agency, and this established the Tahoe Science Advisory Council, or TSAC. In essence, the role of TSAC is to coordinate science and research activities in the Tahoe Basin to be the bridge between the research community and the land managers and the policymakers. The goal is to put science into action. This science into action is critical for all of our decisions here at the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, our State Lands Division. They coordinate the Tahoe Environmental Improvement Program for Nevada. We also have our Nevada Division of Environmental Protection. They're responsible for coordinating and overseeing the total maximum daily load program to protect and restore lake clarity. NDEP also has oversight responsibilities regarding drinking water, as Lake Tahoe is the drinking water source for many Nevadans. And then State Parks is responsible for making land and recreation management decisions in an environment where increasing recreation pressures are creating stresses on our environment. We do have a long track record of success in environmental protection and restoration in the Tahoe Basin as a result of the various environmental programs being carried out not just by Nevada, but among all stakeholders. However, we have emerging ecological threats that may threaten our past and future investment. A warming climate creates new challenges regarding achieving lake clarity and protecting the basin from invasive species. Recreation demand continues to steadily increase, creating more stresses on our environment. And drought is causing more stress in the already overstocked forest, creating a forest ecosystem more prone to disease and catastrophic wildfires. As a conservation and natural resource department, we need research to inform our decisions, and we need to utilize the best available science to maximize Nevada's investment in Lake Tahoe. This resolution signals strong support for that effort, as well as a coordinated science effort in order for us to make the best decisions possible based on the best available science. And that concludes my testimony, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much to you both for the presentation. I appreciate it. With that, again, to the others who were presenting, what we're going to do is we're going to open it up to members of the committee for questions to Assemblywoman Peters and Mr. Lawrence. Then we'll open it up into testimony, and we'll make sure to have you right up front in the queue to provide your remarks at that time. So with that, members, do we have any questions for the presenters? Assemblywoman Titus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Assemblywoman Peters, for bringing this forward. I did have the privilege of serving on that committee one interim, and it was an eye-opener for me for sure, although I've always enjoyed going to Tahoe my entire life. It was a different situation for sure to see the challenges that that wonderful lake has. My question revolves around the need for this particular piece of legislation, however, because one of the things I did learn on that committee is that there are wonderful groups already involved in this, whether it's the DRI, whether it's University of Nevada Research. We went out on the boat and checked out the fish, and we understood about potential risk to the water quality, invasion of mussels, et cetera. What is lacking in that this resolution is trying to fix? Because from what I understand, the last thing in the world we needed at Lake Tahoe was more regulation, and quite the contrary, you were trying to consolidate things that were happening so that you didn't have 35 agencies involved trying to get one decision made, kind of the definition of a camel, lots of people working on it. And after the Angora fire, you realized how you were harming the state, actually, of this Tahoe by having so many regulatory bodies, by having so many things you had to check before you could do anything. And I'm just concerned, my question is why? What is the piece that we're missing that this would solve?
Let's start with Mr. Lawrence on that one.
Sure. For the record, Jim Lawrence, Deputy Director, DCNR. Thank you for the question. To you and through you, Chair Watts, to Assemblywoman Titus. A couple of thoughts. Excellent question. One is this does not create a new regulatory body. This is really to support the existing Tahoe Science Advisory Council. And what we are really doing with this resolution is encouraging just what you were asking about, more coordination, less duplication. And so while there are continued coordinated efforts, and a lot of the research institutions are doing very excellent research work up there, what this resolution does is it encourages the institutions under MSHE to coordinate basically their scientific efforts, so we're not duplicating or overlapping, and we're being more efficient with our dollars and addressing the most critical science needs that the Conservation and Natural Resource Departments have.
Follow up, Mr. Chair?
Go ahead.
What I'm gathering from that, Mr. Lawrence, is that partly this will help solve the problem that there's not the University of Nevada doing a study on how far can you see that disk when you drop it into the Tahoe versus UC Davis doing that same study, and you're just trying to coordinate efforts so that you can maximize time, effort, and monies. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yeah, for the record, Jim Lawrence, that's exactly correct. Like I said, there's great research. But there's a lot of research that we need to make the best decisions that we can with our investments. And so, yeah, we want to avoid duplication and we want to maximize the effort. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question.
Thank you. Members, any additional questions for our presenters? All right. Seeing none, thank you both for the presentation. We very much appreciate it. With that, we're going to go ahead and open up testimony on Senate Concurrent Resolution number 9, and we do have somebody in the room, so we'll start with folks wishing to provide testimony in the room. Welcome, and you may proceed whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon, Chair and Committee. My name is Emily Walsh, EMILYWALSH, and I appear today on behalf of the League to Save Lake Tahoe in support of SCR 9. Coordinated efforts to address the research needs to make sure that we're taking care of the lake are really important, and if we're also able to coordinate, we are saving money that our institutions really need. So to keep this brief, we just very much urge the committee to support this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you very much. With that, seeing nobody else in the room, we'll go to Zoom So whoever would like to go first, please state and spell your name, and you will have 2 minutes. You can proceed whenever you're ready.
I'm happy to go first. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, for the record, I am Dr. Sean McKenna, SEAN-MCKENNA, Executive Director of the Division of Hydrologic Sciences at Desert Research Institute. And I'm happy to be here today in support of SCR 9. As you know, DRI is home to more than 450 scientists, engineers, technicians with campuses in both Reno and Las Vegas. And we have conducted a wide variety of research at Lake Tahoe over the past several decades. We do this with our colleagues at UNR, and other colleagues in California, and we are members of the Tahoe Science Advisory Council. I'm just going to point out 2 things here in support of SCR 9, and that is, first of all, there are some new threats to water clarity at Lake Tahoe. One of those was discovered in Lake Tahoe 2 years ago by DRI scientists, and that is microplastics. Microplastics are the remains of plastic materials or clothing or products that break down into very small pieces, and they do not go away. Microplastics are also part of some skincare lotions, sun blocking lotions, and because of that, they get into the lake. Their effects on Lake Tahoe and on the wider food chain are just now being realized and studied. Additionally, there has been considerable work in the uplands, as Mr. Lawrence mentioned, around the basin. Connecting those research components done in the uplands on the forests to water quality and connecting them through riparian zones to the lake is another area that needs additional work. Now, we have worked with our colleagues at UNR and the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources on a federal appropriations request to further this work at Lake Tahoe. The federal request includes an emphasis on sustainable recreation in an effort to protect the lake while sustaining recreational activities. If this project is funded, one of the deliverables will be the development of an open data platform to make existing and new data on water clarity and other aspects of Lake Tahoe and the basin available to all parties. And again, this will drive more cooperation between the different federal and state agencies at the lake. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much for your testimony, Mr. McKenna. We appreciate it and you joining us, and well done. You came in just at 2 minutes, so thank you. With that, will the next person wishing to offer testimony by Zoom, you may proceed whenever you're ready.
Sure, I can go. My name is Sudeep Chandra. I'm the director of the University of Nevada's Global Water Center and an associate professor in the biology department. Lake Tahoe has long been a major economic provider for the northern Nevada region. The environment and the ecology of the lake are intimately tied to the recreational opportunities and to the Lake Tahoe and regional economy. Science information has long guided our efforts to protect Lake Tahoe. The partnering education institutions from California and Nevada, including the University of Nevada and Desert Research Institute, remain committed to working with our resource agencies and planning agencies to promote an environmentally sustainable Lake Tahoe. In the last decade, the university and the Desert Research Institute have worked closely together to understand the causes of nearshore habitat degradation, whether it's from the microplastics that were just mentioned or nutrient runoff, understanding how to control and manage for invasive species and how shifting climates might influence the upland watershed system from forest to the lake. As Deputy Director Lawrence mentioned, both institutions are part of the newly formed Tahoe Science Advisory Council, a bi-state California-Nevada effort to bring scientists and managers together to solve and address pressing questions related to the protection of Lake Tahoe and its economy. So I thank you in support of this resolution. Our university looks forward to continuing to work with the Desert Research Institute and our management agencies within Nevada to help protect Lake Tahoe well into the 21st century. So thank you for all your help and support.
Thank you very much for providing your testimony and support. We appreciate it. With that, is there anyone else wishing to provide testimony in support via Zoom? Seeing nobody turning on their camera, we will now go to anyone wishing to provide testimony in support via telephone. BPS, can we see if we have anyone in the queue?
To testify in support on SCR 9, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits 508, please press star 6 to unmute. Please fully state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Thank you, Chair Watts, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Robert Larson, ROBERTLARSEN, and I serve as the program officer for the Bi-State Tahoe Science Advisory Council. I want to thank Assemblywoman Peters and Deputy Director Lawrence for their presentations and testimony, and for Nevada's ongoing support for the Science Partnership at Lake Tahoe. Thanks also to Dr. Chandra and McKenna for their comments today. I realize many have spoken in support, and I don't want to repeat everything that's been said. I just want to reiterate that the importance of science-driven decision-making in today's world. There's a lot of things changing at Lake Tahoe, and fortunately, there's a strong science management partnership here in the watershed, and the Tahoe Science Advisory Council continues in that tradition to continue to leverage that partnership and make sure that we're asking the right questions and doing the right work necessary to inform the work that we need to do. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here today. I'm also grateful to serve both California and Nevada as the Science Council liaison, and on behalf of the Council and the California Natural Resources Agency, I offer our support for SCR 9. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your remarks. We'll go on to the next caller in support.
Chair, there are no more callers in support at this time.
Thank you very much. With that, we'll move on to testimony in opposition of SCR 9. Seeing none in the room or by Zoom, BPS, can we see if we have anyone wishing to provide opposition testimony by phone?
To testify in opposition on SCR 9, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in opposition at this time.
Thank you very much. And with that, we'll move to testimony in neutral on SCR 9. Seeing none in the room, anyone by Zoom? Seeing none there, BPS, can we see if we have anyone wishing to provide neutral testimony by phone?
To testify in neutral on SCR 9, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in neutral at this time.
All right. With that, Assemblywoman Peters, Mr. Lawrence, are there any closing remarks you'd wish to make? I see none down here. Mr. Lawrence? All right, no closing remarks. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. With that, I will close the hearing on SCR 9, and as folks are accustomed, we're going to take a very brief recess. All right, having closed the hearing on SCR 9, I will now open up a work session on SCR 9. Members, are there any questions? Seeing none, I would accept a motion to do pass SCR 9. I have a motion from Assemblyman Wheeler. Do I have a second? Second from Assemblywoman Titus. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously of the members present. With Assemblywoman Peters here, I'm going to go ahead and assign the floor statement to her, with Assemblyman Wheeler as a backup. With that, members, we've still got time, and we've got one item left on our agenda, and that is, let's see, I believe Senate Bill 443. So with that, I will open the hearing on SB 443. I believe we have Ms. Brown joining us to present this. Welcome to the committee. You may proceed whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Megan Brown, and I'm the Deputy Administrator for the Plant Industry Division for Nevada Department of Agriculture. I'm here today presenting on SB 43. And with your tight schedule, I'm going to kind of summarize my testimony so that there will be more time for questions. This bill proposes additions and modifications that affect the standards governing seeds. The modifications would affect those selling seeds in the state and those that wholesale or sell seeds in stores or nurseries. The department requested these changes based on our department strategic plan to update and modernize our regulations. These changes will help bring the department in line with federal seed standards and other Western states' regulations that provide consistency for those that sell seeds in multiple states. As this industry advances, neighboring states have already implemented similar and or identical regulations when modernizing terminology and ensuring seed quality related to expected shelf life of its contents. Modernization of Nevada's seed law is needed to protect the integrity of the industry throughout the state. Nevada's seed law is intended to protect consumers and assist them in making informed decisions when purchasing viable products. Sellers and consumers alike need that affirmation that the products offered for sale comply with state and national standards, such as the Federal Seed Act, and uphold quality thresholds. When purchasing seed, consumers need to have the assurance that the products are free from certain weed species and that the products will perform as indicated on the label. The recommended uniform state seed law is a collection of suggested regulatory language compiled by the Association of American Seed Control Officials. And this uniform seed law is what we use for the basis of the definitions that you see in this bill. It is also the recommendation of the uniform seed law to establish, quote, sub-by dates for seed packaging in order to ensure that the market is offering viable and quality products. Again, Nevada's seed law modernization is needed to protect the integrity of the industry for sellers and consumers alike. The proposed language in SB 43 would affect seed coming into the state that, the proposed language in SB 443 that would affect seed coming into the state does not affect the retailer's actions or requirements. The requirements are on the wholesaler to know the requirements for sale in each state. The seed should not be entering Nevada without these labeling features. So if a store owner is importing seed, they do not have any additional burden for labeling or requirements for selling seed. And by Nevada adopting the uniform seed law standards, we're assisting the seed industry in creating a consistent regulations from state to state, making process for wholesalers simple and consistent, and potentially making it easier for wholesalers to sell seed in Nevada. And that concludes my presentation, and happy to take any questions.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for the overview, Ms. Brown. We appreciate it. And with that, we will go to questions from members. Seems like we have a few. I will start with Assemblyman Wheeler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Brown, I see we've got a lot of record keeping in here in section 2.2b. We've got declarations, labels, purchase of sales, conditioning, bulking, treatment, handling, storage, analysis, tests, and examinations. So with all that extra record keeping, I also noticed, there's no fiscal note attached, so that's good. But does it not have any kind of fiscal consequences for the department? And are you anticipating any new fees or increase in existing fees to cover the additional costs?
For the record, Megan, Department of Agriculture, for the record, yes, there will be some new fees through NAC changes for wholesalers and retailers of seeds, and we'll go through that public process to establish those.
Okay, thank you. Actually, my follow-up would be, for legal.
I believe I know what your follow-up is, so I'll ask it. Ms. Brown, there's already existing statutory authority for you to modify those fees under NAC, is that correct?
That is my understanding, but I would defer to legal, or if Administrator Jepson wanted to step in if she had a different.
Mr. Amburn, would you like to step in?
Alan Emram for the record. So there's two sections in this specific subchapter dealing with seeds that provide, require the establishment of a schedule of fees. One of those is NRS 587077, so that requires the director to establish a schedule of fees for the certification. And then the other one is 587079, and that authorizes the director to establish a schedule of fees for grading and testing, I believe, of the seeds.
And just for some added clarity, Mr. Amburn, are there caps on those?
Alan Amram for the record. There's no statutory caps on those. It's just one is a fee requirement, the other one is fee authority. That's just existing in language. I don't believe that this bill is addressing those.
Got it. So any adjustments are within the existing statutory authority, as long as they're related to those subjects as you laid out. Thank you. With that, I believe Assemblywoman Hanson had a question.
Thank you, Chair. One of them was just answered somewhat. Let me go through my notes here. And thank you, Ms. Brown, for being here. So the sell-by date in Section 15, just a general question. There is no federal requirement or anything that seeds that are already sold in the state have to be, we don't have to comply with any sell-by date on seed packaging currently?
For the record, Megan Brown, Department of Agriculture. So it is my understanding under the Federal Seed Act that a sell-by date is not a requirement, but in the Uniform Seed Law is a recommendation to be able to have a sell-by date so that germination requirement is standardized throughout.
Okay, and if I could follow up, Chair. I'm curious what kind of strain this will put on your department. It seems to me that there's going to be quite some oversight to make sure all of this is being followed. Is that going to require additional equipment or staff for you to oversee that those that are selling, procuring, are following these new guidelines?
For the record, Megan Brown, Nevada Department of Agriculture. We currently inspect nurseries, which are the main source of seed sold in the state, and so inspections are already occurring, and so we don't anticipate a new staff level for inspectors that are already doing those activities.
And then just one last one, Chair. This might be for legal. In the Legislative Digest, line 2 and 3, where it refers to sections 2 through 11 of this bill, define certain terms that apply to the standards that govern seeds, including without limitation terms such as complete records and conditioning, which appear in existing sections of Nevada revised statutes but not in the new language of this bill. So I'm not, is that what you were citing earlier, that there's those other statutes? I'm just, I'm curious why it says in here it doesn't occur, this does not appear in the new language. Is complete records and conditioning not something that already exists?
Mr. Amburn, would you like to weigh in on that?
Thank you, Chair Watts. Alan Amburn for the record. So, for example, looking at Section 2 of the bill, complete records, I believe that term is used in NRS 587-107. So in that situation, it was an existing term that was undefined, so there was ambiguity in the existing law. So I believe that the intent behind this is to provide that specificity of the definition. I think There might be one or two situations in this bill where we have defined terms, I believe in sections 2 through 11, and then we added in that term later on in this bill, just that way that term is used. But I believe most of these terms are defining existing terms are in statute already.
Great, thank you, that helps.
All right. Thank you for that. Other questions from members? Assemblyman Ellison.
Thank you, and thank you, Ms. Brown. I was looking back on section 15, and it talks about for a counter of seeds or a container of seeds of the Echo Corp must be not more than 15 months after that date. Is that after the date it expires? Is that what that is? If you look back on section 15B.
Megan Brown, for the record, Nevada Department of Agriculture. It's my understanding from the test date. So those seeds that are tested for germination, there's a date that occurred, and then it's 15 months past that date.
Okay, and then the other thing is, I'm glad you got noxious weeds in here. That's a big problem we have. But I know during some of the fires, when they were trying to do some reseeding, they never did come up with enough seeds to do some of the areas they wanted to do. Is that correct? So would, this could affect this if, or any other agricultural area that can't get enough seeds in there if they got a pull date on them like this now. Is that right?
Megan Brown, for the record, I can't speak to the quantity of seed that's available within the state. So these regulations are for seeds that are for sale at retail, which is for commercial purchase, if that helps.
Thank you, Ms. Brown, for that. And I'd just add, Mr. Ellison, that a lot of that is also within DCNR and the Division of Forestry. And so I think there's different seed supplies for reseeding and habitat restoration versus commercial level for agricultural use. And so I think that's where some of that difference is
I
coming
know
up.
that they did run in with a problem a couple sessions back when we had large fires, and I know the Forest Service was working trying to get that. But I did go to, I did this week go into like Save Mark or whatever it is right down the street here and looking at some of the seeds that you'd see for planting like vegetables and pumpkins and stuff like this. And I looked on every one of them packages and there was not a date on there how long them seeds has been there. So there is no dates. And I looked on pumpkins, I looked on lettuce, I looked on avocados, I looked on all kinds of stuff, and there wasn't a date one on any of them.
Ms. Brown, would you like to respond to that?
Megan Brown, for the record, I think there's a difference between the sell-by date and then how long the seeds have been for sale. And I guess the intent of the bill is to have that sell-by date that's tied to the germination and the viability of the seed, so the consumers understand that they're purchasing seed that's still viable for production.
One last follow-up. Go ahead, Mr.
But
Ellison.
if that's the case, there's no dates on it at all right now. So as I'm looking at the little package trying to find out how old these seeds were, there was nothing on there. So this is going to be something that's new that's going to have to go back to wherever they package and say they're going to have to put a date on these at that point in time. Is that correct?
Megan Brown, Nevada Department of Ag, for the record, it's our intention as we move through the legislative process and the public process is the education. And so we're trying to address consumer protection and that angle, as well as educating our wholesalers and seed sellers of our new regulations if they were to pass.
Thank you. I believe next we have a question from Assemblywoman Brown May.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ms. Brown. I appreciate the intent of where you're going with this. And I just have one clarifying question. It's really relative to the federal standards that exist now with regard to seeds and how they're sold at retail. It's based on what you said. I believe I understand that currently the federal regulation does not require that a sell-by date be included in the packaging, but that there's a coalition that believes this is the right direction to go. So this would be more strict than federal regulation. Is that correct?
Megan Brown, for the record, I would prefer to go back and research to say with 100% correctness regarding the federal seed law, but it is my understanding that the federal seed law does not. But let me pull up my testimony here. And so it's the Association of American Seed Control Officials who have provided recommended uniform state seed law. And in that recommended seed law is the establishment of sell-by dates in packaging in order to ensure the market is offering viable and quality products, and that consumers are protected and not purchasing seeds that are no longer viable.
Thank you. So I believe the answer is yes. Additional questions? Assemblywoman Titus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for being able to ask a question. I'm still a little bit at loss of the need for this particular bill. With the question that was just asked, there are no federal requirements that they do this at this time, correct?
Megan Brown, for the record, maybe more specific. What you
There's a group that recommends you do this, but currently there, yes or no, there are no federal requirements that we do this at this time, correct?
For the aspect of the sell-by date, there's no federal requirements.
Okay. Are there
other states are?
Are there other states
Yes,
that
there
require
are quite
that
a few other states. Yes.
Will it be retroactive because it becomes effective on passage? So all of the seed producers, the current stuff and stocked on the shelf, I'm sorry if you already clarified this, will they have to pull those off the shelf? Is there a time will they have then to put the stamp date on there of when they expire? How will there be the logistics behind the implementation of this?
Megan Brown, Nevada Department of Agriculture, for the record. So yes, many of our other Western states and neighboring states are using the recommended uniform seed law. So just for context, and I may defer to Administrator Johnson on the time frame related to implementation and fathering of product already within the state.
Ms. Jepson, would you like to speak to that?
Yes, I'm happy. If I may, for the record, Ashley Gibson, I'm hoping the sound's coming through okay. So there would be a transition. We'd have to be doing education and outreach to these groups to make sure that they're aware that they need to be adding that label. And as Deputy Administrator brought out, our most other states are requiring this labels. It's for consumer protection. And our approach here is to really try to make sure that poor products, that Nevada isn't ending up being the dumping ground for them. So trying to have that consistency on expectations and making sure that viable products are coming to the state. But of course, we'd want to work and make sure people are successful and allow for some gradual time for there to be some accommodations made.
Follow up on that?
Go ahead.
Chair? So I'm curious as to are there any seed producers currently in the state of Nevada that would be affected, or all of our seeds that we actually sell in the state produce in another state?
Megan Brown, for the Department of Agriculture. So currently, we have a few seed producers in the state, and in conversations with our staff within the seed lab, those entities are already meeting these standards.
Excellent. And then just last question, if I might, Mr. along Assemblyman Ellison's questions. We've heard in this committee over several sessions the lack of seeds for are reforestation, revegetation, the impacts of wildfire, whether it's sagebrush, peach brush, or all of those native plants to our state. And they're in warehouses throughout our state, and there's a true lack of supply. Will this actually affect those entities? Literally, people go out with nets along the sagebrush trying to collect some of those seeds. It's a difficult process. They're hard to germinate to begin with. It's challenging. Will this affect that, or strictly it's a commercial product for resale on the shelf at the local tractor store or nursery where I want to buy some seeds to plant my little row of corn?
Megan Brown, Nevada Department of Agriculture, for the record. That is correct. This is for commercial applications. And so there are separate regulations that deal with the seed stuff that you're discussing, but these particular regulations and effects will only relate to the retail market.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, ma'am, and thank you, Mr. Chair, for the questions.
Of course, thank you for the questions, and I appreciate some of the clarification that the department provided on this applying prospectively, and there being a process of engaging with the industry to and consumers to educate and incorporate this. I just had one additional follow-up question. Ms. Brown, if you do have it available, could you let us know what are some of the other states that have adopted this language, and in particular some of the language relating to Section 15 with the sell-by dates? Or at least states that are in the region.
Megan Brown, Nevada Department of Agriculture, for the record. So currently, I'm happy to provide a full list, but I do know that Arizona, Colorado, Oregon, and Wyoming have already adopted these exact terms and languages, and I'm happy to get you a full Western state list.
Thank you. I very much appreciate you being able to rattle those off the top of your head, and if you are able to send something as follow-up to our committee staff and we get it out to the members, I think they'd all appreciate that. Members, are there any other questions? Seeing none, thank you again for the presentation and for answering our questions. With that, we will move on to testimony on SB 443. We'll begin with testimony in support. Seeing none in the room, BPS, can we see if we have anyone by phone?
To testify in support on SB 443, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in support at this time.
Thank you very much. With that, we'll go to testimony in opposition. Seeing none in the room, let's see if we have anyone available by phone.
To testify in opposition on SB 443, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in opposition at this time.
Thank you. And with that, we'll move to testimony in the neutral position. Seeing nobody on the room, is there anyone on the Zoom? Seeing nobody hopping on there, BPS, can we see if we have anybody by phone?
To testify in neutral on SB 443, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in neutral at this time.
All right. Thank you very much. Ms. Brown, are there any closing remarks that you'd like to make?
Megan Brown, Nevada Department of Agriculture, for the record. Just appreciate the time and the questions and engagement.
All right. Thank you very much. With that, I think folks know the drill. I will close the hearing on SB 443, and we're going to take a brief recess. All right. With that, we're going to open up a work session on SB 443. Which we just heard. So with that, members, are there any questions on the bill overall? Understanding that we just completed the hearing, and we will be having discussion on a motion most likely. Seeing a question about the bill, Councilman Wheeler. Go ahead.
Thank you. It just looks to me like with the setting the fees by regulation, et cetera, they're getting around Ways and Means, they're getting around the 2/3 vote. I can't go there. Thank you, so I will be a no.
Thank you. Understand that. At the same time, I think we did get the record cleared that we have already established the fee authorities in statute, but understand where you're coming from. Any other questions or comments? Assemblywoman Hanson.
Thank you, Chair. There are parts I like. I like the sell by date. I like that transparency. I do have some concerns that what I think we're talking about, the fees and what might be part of the reg process, I think 587.077, if I'm right. I don't see that in the bill, and so that transparency part kind of bothers me. So for that, I'll be no in committee. Thank you.
Understood. Appreciate that. And as you know, sections that aren't being amended don't appear in the bills, but they remain throughout the chapter. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, I would accept a motion to do pass SB 443. I've got a motion from Vice Chair Cohen. Do I have a second? Second from Assemblywoman Carlton. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? Nay. Will the nays please raise your hands? I've got Assemblywoman Titus, Assemblywoman Hanson, Assemblyman Wheeler, and Assemblyman Ellison. With that, the motion does carry. And I will take the floor statement on that one, actually. With that, members, that concludes the business on our agenda today, and that leaves one item before us, which is public comment. So with that, we'll turn it over to BPS one more time to see if we have anyone in the public comment queue.
Chair, the public line is open and working. However, there are no callers at this time.
All right, thank you very much. And seeing no one in the room, members, again, this concludes all the business that is before us right now. I've heard from staff that there are a couple of measures in the Senate that may or may not come over here, depending on how things get, what gets here and where it gets referred. If this is the last meeting, it's been an honor working with you all. And yeah, if we have another meeting, be prepared to show up on short notice. With that, thank you all very much for your time. This meeting is adjourned.